What is going on, everybody, and welcome to Rant on Wrestling. I'm your host, the King of Talk Style, the man with the golden mic, the elite POV hunter, Anthony DeStefano, and we have a very special episode tonight. Usually I rant on a topic of wrestling, right? Usually it's positive or negative, and I'm ranting about a particular event or a superstar. This one's going to be different because my rant tonight is a thank you to AEW, a thank you to professional wrestling. A couple years ago, I left the podcast game because I wasn't in love with pro wrestling anymore. The pro wrestling that I loved changed, and I fell in love with podcasting because of it. I felt burnout. I felt exhausted because I wasn't as passionate about the product as I once was. And the idea of going to a WrestleMania wasn't as enticing as it once was. And the idea of creating content and acting fake and being fake and not being, what we were known for, and that was realist. We were always real. We were always positive. And it's hard to be positive about something that you're not passionate about anymore. So I left the podcast game. We tried to come back with the Rant Foundation, and that was just because I missed my friends. I didn't miss pro wrestling. Around that time, AEW starts. And I'm keeping my eye on AEW, right? I'm keeping my eye on it because a lot of my favorites are going there. John Moxley's going there, for instance. And I kept up with it. I kept up with who was winning. I'd watch it casually. I went from a hardcore, diehard fan to casually watching it. It wasn't the same. Pro wrestling didn't hit the same chord as it used to. But as I started watching AEW, I started noticing things that I missed about pro wrestling. And it made me really start to love pro wrestling again. Now I was out of the podcast game. Pro wrestling wise, I didn't want to get back in. I didn't want to create content for pro wrestling anymore. And April 18th happened, and my brother passed away, and my mental health went from bad to worse. I've always had a little bit of like a anxiety, anger issue, and I was having severe panic attacks, severe anxiety attacks in the middle of the night. And I felt lost. Thank God for my wife and my kids and my family, but I felt lost, right? I felt, what can I do to keep my mind busy? What can I do to put a positive spin on my emotions? And usually when I'm upset, I work and I create, and I'm much better with my back against the wall and feeling down because then I can create. Then my mind is at ease when I'm creating. I'm not thinking about all of the negatives, all of the things that are affecting me, my loss, my career. We were selling our house. Like, I wasn't thinking about any of that when I was creating. And I said, what can I do? So I was streaming, and streaming was fun, right? And I still stream video games every once in a while. I do a wrestling one, but I was streaming other games. And when I kept my mind busy, it wasn't a passion, right? I felt passionate about it, but it didn't drive me to be better. It didn't drive me to use my talent. It didn't drive me to use my voice that I once had with Rant with Ant. And, my brother passes, and I start, I'm off that week, and Wednesday night's on. I'm like, got to keep my mind busy. Let me watch Dynamite. Let me sit down and watch Dynamite. And I remember sitting there and smiling because at that moment I realized that what I was missing and what I've been missing was pro wrestling and creating pro wrestling content. Now, again, I was very weary about the podcast thing, right? Like, I don't want to start and stop and start and stop. Like, that's not fair to our listeners. That's not fair to us. That's not fair to our mental. So I eased in, but then the next Wednesday I was watching. And then the next Wednesday I was watching, and I'm talking to Phil, Rob, Scott, Carrie, like all my good friends. Kyle Masters, I'm talking to him. Then I get introduced to Jackie, who I talk to now, and Jamie and Infinity. And the community started growing, and I started talking to all my old friends as well about pro wrestling, and I realized content creating is what I missed, and especially about pro wrestling, because I missed pro wrestling so much that I had a void, and that needed to be filled. And once I sat down and watched the episode of AEW Dynamite, all of it came back. All the passion came back. And then I was like finding myself on Wednesday night. It felt like when I was in grade school, and Monday night I'd rush home from school and just wait for Raw and Nitro to come on. That's how I feel now every Wednesday. It's like I cannot wait to watch Dynamite tonight. Of course, I'm watching it with my friends, but the product is that good, and it's just an escape for me. And as the product got better, I realized, man, like pro wrestling, when it is good, it is great, and it is fun, and it is a life changer, and it's a lifesaver. And it pulled me out of really dark, thoughts and mindset and depression and, grief, because grief comes in waves. You don't know when it's going to hit you. It just does, right? And I think that, as a mental escape, pro wrestling lets you go into a different universe, a multiverse, if you will, where, you could just get lost in a storyline, and you have your heroes and you have your villains, and you have all these awesome matches where it's just like, man, like it's so entertaining, and you escape the problems of the world, and you're so, indulged into what happened or what's happening or what's gonna happen. And that's the beautiful thing about pro wrestling. I realize that's what I miss. And I realize that's what gets a lot of people through the darkest times. And, I always say, the good side of pro wrestling community is the best community to be a part of. And it is. Now, we all know that there's a bad side of it who, troll and bully and all the shit that's not cool, right? But when you find good people in pro wrestling, they're some of the best people you'll meet in your life. And I'm blessed that I met so many amazing people, and I have so many amazing friends, and that AEW exists, right? Because AEW to me brought back everything I love about pro wrestling. So we start talking, Phil and I start going, hey, I want to start creating content, pro wrestling content. I miss it. I need it. There's a void in my life. I need to do this. Are you willing to start another show with me? And at the time, Phil had a couple episodes of Elite POV. He had stopped because a solo show is very, very hard to do. And he said, let's do it. I said, one condition. We don't take it serious, right? We don't try to make a brand. Man, was that a lie? Because 2 months, 3 months later, we started in August. Then CM Punk comes back. So let's just talk about that, right? Like, we start, and then my favorite wrestler of all time comes to AEW. Then Bryan Danielson comes to AEW. Then Adam Cole comes to AEW. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the best gift in the world, is that all these guys that I love watching are coming to the company that I love watching, that I fell in love with. And we go, okay, let's not take it too serious. 3 episodes in, we go, maybe we should start getting serious about it. Then we have Jackie on. Then we go, okay, that felt right. Jackie's on. So then we're like, let's make this really serious. Let's have fun again, but let's make this a brand. Let's make this a community. Because love it or hate it, pro wrestling communities, man, it's like a family. And the family that we have at Elite POV with our community has been supportive, has been helpful, has reached out when, my real life, let me get my hand in there, real life friends haven't reached out. And they're there for you every step of the way. They become your best friends. Phil and I met through pro wrestling. We didn't know each other before that. Phil's my best friend. Kyle Masters, Jackie. We all met through this pro wrestling realm. And pro wrestling as an escape for me has been unreal. And I know a lot of people, if you checked out Top Girl Talk, which is available on our YouTube, a lot of people wrote in about how positive pro wrestling can be on your mindset. You forget about the problems. You forget that you're sick. You forget that you hate your job. You work a 9 to 5 that you can't stand. But guess what? At 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, fuck that job. You know what I mean? Like you're escaping in your mind, and you're allowing yourself to dream. And that's what pro wrestling is to me. It's like a dream. It's like you get lost in your imagination. The what ifs, the whys, the hows, all of it comes out. And I want to thank AEW for that. And I want to thank the community of AEW because I think AEW's fans have been super supportive of everyone, especially their own fans. And I think that's unbelievable. So as we start getting serious about Elite POV and interviewing Ty Conti as Phil and Kyle did, which was unbelievable, I want to know how pro wrestling has helped you mentally. I want to know what pro wrestling has done for you. The positives. Let's talk about the positives of pro wrestling. Let's ignore all the negatives, everything that's online. Let's talk about the positives of pro wrestling. Let's talk about how pro wrestling is an escape from reality. Because at my lowest, when I lost my brother, I needed something to cling on to again, right? And I needed something to keep my mind off it. And I went back to pro wrestling, and I found my passion. I found my love again, and I don't think I'm ever going to let it go. I don't think I'm ever going to let pro wrestling go. Pro wrestling's ingrained in me, right? And people make fun of it, and pro wrestling has saved my life. Pro wrestling has given me an outlet for my anger, my anxiety, my depression, right? And pro wrestling is always there for me. Every single night I can watch pro wrestling. Wednesdays and Fridays are my favorite, but I can go back. I can watch Being the Elite. I can watch YouTube. I can listen to podcasts. Pro wrestling is always there for you. And even during a pandemic, the only, TV show that kind of stayed consistent and constant was pro wrestling. And I tried getting back into it during the COVID era with Moxley, my man, as champion, and I didn't feel ready. And it's okay not to feel ready of something that you lost passion for, but man, never shut the door on it, because I promised myself I would never make wrestling content again, and here I am doing Rant on Wrestling, do Elite POV, falling back in love with it, creating an amazing community. So I want to know your thoughts. How has pro wrestling helped you? How has pro wrestling impacted your life positively? What positives, the drive, right? Like right now I'm kind of on like almost like a health mission because Jay Cargill inspired me, right? Like I see these people all healthy on TV, and I'm like, man, I want to do that. Mentally, being the best in the world. I remember when CM Punk was in WWE, I had the best in the world mentality. At work, I wanted to be the best in the world. I wanted to be able to win awards so I could say I was the best in the world, and I did. I accomplished it because it's a mentality. Pro wrestling has helped my mentality. It's helped with my physical activity, which still needs to get better, but it's helped me so much mentally. So thank you, pro wrestling. Thank you, AEW, for being my escape. And we'll see you in a couple weeks with a new topic. I think the next one's going to be about CM Punk returning to pro wrestling. I want to keep this positive. I want to keep this positive mindset going, because I don't see why I would sit here and bitch about something I love so much. That's not fun to me. Talking about the enjoyment it brings me, that's what's fun to me. So thank you, pro wrestling. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Check out Elite POV every Thursday night at 7 p.m.